Hello everyone, my name is Joe Kunnuji. Welcome to my African Music Conversations. In this video, I will be answering about 10 questions that I think are fundamental to understanding the traditional musical practices of Southern Africa. I think these are the questions that will come to the mind of someone who is new to the music of Southern Africa. Stay tuned. Before going into today's topic, I'd like to say a big thank you to you all who have subscribed to this channel. I am indeed encouraged by the amazing and fantastic comments under the previous videos that I made. And if you're new to this channel or you have been watching without subscribing, kindly subscribe and click on the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my subsequent videos. Southern Africa is the region of the continent that is south of the Kunene and Zambezi rivers. And the countries in this region include Angola, Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Eswatini, and South Africa. Although Madagascar falls within this region geographically, it's not far from the shores of Mozambique. We will not include Madagascar in this discussion because of its distinct cultural heritage. We will discuss Madagascar separately at some point. Talking about cultural heritages, it is important to note that all the countries that I mentioned earlier on did not exist before the colonial partitioning of Africa during the Berlin Conference in 1884 to 1885. Instead, various people groups, various indigenous people groups moved within the region. They mixed, they intermarried, and so much exchanges took place, cultural exchanges. And this is reflected in the kind of musical instruments that you will find within the Southern African region. The first indigenous people groups of Southern Africa are the Khoi and the San. The Khoi were the ones that the Europeans met at the Cape of Good Hope in the 15th century, and they referred to them as the Hottentots, which is an offensive term today. So the Khoi or Khoi group is made up of about 4 subgroups: the Korana, the Nama, the Eastern Hottentots, and the Cape Hottentots. They were traditionally pastoralists or cattle headers. The San, referred to by the Europeans as Bushmen, another problematic term, resided in the Kalahari Desert and neighboring areas in today's Botswana, Namibia, and Angola. They lived in small bands of between 20 and 50 members related by blood or marriage, and their societies were egalitarian, without hierarchy and without leaders. And so many have described San societies as utopia. The first indigenous peoples of Southern Africa had musical activities that later spread to other peoples within the region. The Khoi and the San had hunting bows that doubled as musical instruments. The Khoi had the gora, which they used in accompanying cattle herding, while the San had the goma, which was a hunting bow that doubled as a mouth-resonated musical bow. The mouth-resonated San bow was made with palm leaf ribbons instead of strings, which is common today. The San also had the group bow, played by 3 people, called the Kambulumbuba. In the Southern African region, almost every people group has its own musical bow, but these bows are different, first in their names and also in the structure or what the bows look like. Much of San musical activities were self-expressions based on the issues of their daily lives. For instance, they sang about the difficulty of finding water and the success of a hunt. San singing is characterized by yodeling and hand clapping, and occasionally it features one or two drums. Songs also accompanied the curative dances or the trance therapy among San people, which was a regular ritual among these indigenous people. They named their songs after the animals common in southern Africa. Some of the songs were called elephant or ostrich dance, hyena, porcupine, and so on. And dances among San people included animal mimicry. Still talking about indigenous instrument, the Europeans found a drum which they call romelpot among Khoi people, and this drum was made by covering pots with skin, animal skin. On the other hand, the San had likembe, which is a plucked lamellophone, and this is believed to have been borrowed from their neighbors. As we will see in some of the subsequent videos, lamellophones are more common among the Shona people of today's Zimbabwe. Apart from the widespread musical bowls, there are a few other instruments that are indigenous to Southern Africa. For instance, the Shona people of today's Zimbabwe are known for their lamellophone called the mbira, and there are various types of mbira. And the Chopi people of today's Mozambique are known for their xylophone called timbila. The singular form is mbila. And an instrument like the marimba found in various parts of the region. Migration, I would say, is the reason why you find similarities in musical instruments and practices within the Southern African region. On the musical bowls, there are two types of sounds, the fundamentals and the harmonics. So the fundamentals are produced through striking or plucking or indirect action on the staff of the bow, which causes the string to vibrate and produce sound. So in the case of the indirect action, some of those bows are referred to as friction bows. Some of the bows are braced, that is, the string is tied at a point to the staff, allowing more fundamental tones. And other ways by which players produce more fundamentals is the use of their thumb to stop the string at some point, or the use of a coin. The harmonics are produced by resonating the fundamental tones, and some bows are mouth resonated, while other bows are calabash or gourd resonated. And in recent times, some players have started using tins to resonate the sounds of the fundamental tones produced. It is impossible to discuss African music today without reference to Europeans' activities on the continent. There is the transatlantic slave trade, then colonialism, then the introduction of Western system of education, and the missionization activities of missionaries on the continent. There is no sphere of life that these activities have not affected. Absolutely no sphere of life. In fact, these activities in Africa have influenced the entire world. For instance, today you go to Brazil and you find an instrument like the berimbau, which is a musical bow that is used to accompany capoeira, a form of martial art. This bow looks very much like the wadi of Xhosa people of Southern Africa. And then the question arises, from where else could this instrument have made its way to Brazil? Obviously from Southern Africa. With sound production technology, many of these indigenous instruments are now being amplified, and they are played alongside instruments like guitar and drum kit in modern African bands. For instance, go listen to the music of Thomas Mafumo. He was the one who popularized the Shona Mbira, And various other indigenous instruments, including the bowls, are now being played in modern setups. There are so many exciting things happening today musically across Africa, and that is to say that no people group are stuck in the past. It's not uncommon for some people to think of Africa and just think about the history of slavery and, the musical instruments without amplification and all of that. The truth is, African instruments are now being used in modern bands all over the continent. When reading the early accounts on African musics, it is important that these accounts were not written by people who were trained to interpret cultures appropriately. Many of these accounts were written by travel writers, by explorers, by colonial administrators and missionaries who made their own interpretations based on, obviously, their background and their understanding at the time. Hence, many of these accounts were comparative. Some of them named instruments based on the instrument that they saw in Europe. For instance, the mbira was called the thumb piano, and the instrument looks nothing like the piano. And some of those accounts were also evolutionists. There are cases where writers observed a tone flute, for instance, a flute that is designed to play one tone, and they assumed it's an earlier version of the European flute, not knowing that there are reasons why some of those instruments were made to produce only one sound. As we will talk about, Africans were quite communal, and there are certain musics that were not meant to be played by one person, as against the individuality of some European cultures where one person plays an entire piano with 88 keys. Some of the musical instruments in Africa were meant to be played in hocket with another person, and the composite sound appears like it's one whole, like a unit. So someone with a background in European art music will see a flute that produces one or two tones and assume that this is an earlier version of our flute with many keys, which is a wrong way of interpreting cultures. Some of these accounts also misrepresented Africans, and others generalized based on a few cases that they observed. And that is why many people who are not from Africa would think that African music is all about drumming, because a few people have observed that, okay, there are certain cultural practices where drumming is central, and then they go out and say that African music is about the drum, is about rhythms. So these are some of the issues with some of the early writings on African musics. And when you generalize based on a few cases that you have observed, you gloss over several subtleties and nuances found on the continent. And lastly, some of these accounts use derogatory terms that depicted hierarchy. They will call the indigenous people natives, in which case natives are supposed to be lesser in hierarchy than the colonial master. There are still so many other things to say about Southern African musical practices. Please feel free to leave other questions or comments below this video and give it a thumbs up if you have enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to share this video with your friends who might be interested in this or similar topics. And don't forget to subscribe if you are yet to subscribe. See you next time.